Hello and welcome to the shed. In today's video we're going to be looking at the quickest or the easiest way to flatten a really bad out of flat blade. So for those of you that saw the last video on how to flatten the back of a plain blade, and I'll leave that link down below, I went through flattening this particular blade here, a near new Stanley Punch blade, and it had a little bit of a twist and was not flattening easily. So then I showed you another method that is quite common, at least on YouTube, using the ruler method, and I had a number of my members and other comments from you out there that suggested that maybe that's not the best method. So today what I wanted to show you is how I would go about flattening my blades so it doesn't take a very long time and we can speed that process up, but without putting a ruler trick or a back bevel on our blade. So for that we're going back to that punched one that I put a back bevel on, and we're going to remove the back bevel and properly flatten this blade. So let's jump down here and I'll talk about what is the best thing to use for that. So since I didn't have any of this because I don't do a lot of sanding, I went down to the local big box store. I picked up a roll of 120 grit and also 80 grit. Now if it's really bad we'll switch to the 80 grit, but for now we're going to start with 120 grit because that is the best place to start. Now this is aluminium oxide. This is just like your standard sort of sandpaper. If you can get wet and dry, I think that's good because you can lubricate it. But for me, the local big box store, it's really expensive, difficult to get in the grits for the wet and dry. So standard sandpaper will do the trick. The other thing I've got is this very, very thin, or in some places called carpet tape. It's a very, very thin double-sided tape, and we're going to use that to attach this sandpaper to a substrate. Now, when we look at substrates, I advocate for melamine. When it comes to some of these cheap setups, but you do have to make sure it's flat, and you need to buy some melamine that is guaranteed to be flat. Now, some of them are guaranteed to be very, very flat, the same tolerances of Lee Nielsen hand planes. This piece I've got here is just from a cupboard. It's not, and this is what I used initially for my sharpening of bevels. We're not going to do that today. This is a plain blade, and the tolerances for getting a chip breaker to mate to the back of your blade is a little more than what you require for the sole of a hand plane, unless it's maybe a jointing hand plane. So what we're going to look at is two options. You can put them on the back of, if you've got these Atoma ones, these are designed that you can actually buy another one of these grits and stick them on the back. So these are flat, and I'll show you that in a minute. The other option is that if you do have one of these granite surfacing plates, you can use this. Obviously, I've already got stones on here. So we're going to have a look to see if the back of this is flat, although the backs of these are not guaranteed to be flat. But if that's flat enough, we can use that. Or if you've got a table saw, some of those, you want to check that your table saw top is flat because they are grey cast iron. Metal like that tends to move, and I noticed that not a lot of people seem to check how flat their tables are before they start. So that's something you want to do. Or the other option is glass. Now, you don't want to get just any old glass. Normal plate glass is not made flat. What you want is called float glass. My understanding is when they make it, they float it on a molten bed of nickel or zinc or something like that, and so it actually gets dead flat floated. However, I don't like the option of glass most of the time because glass does go out of flat over time because it's not actually a solid, it's actually still a liquid. If we're looking at the back of our stones here, let's grab the smallest feeler gauge I have here. So that is 0.038 of a millimeter or 0.0015 of an inch, which you can see right there. That's what it says on there. I'll grab that feeler gauge, grab your flattest ruler, and we can see that it's actually not getting stuck, so the back of this is nice and flat. Now, let's try the back of this. I mean, I know the back of this, these are not guaranteed to be flat on the back, but let's just see. Well, along this edge it's okay. So it looks like we can use the back of this as well. So for this, I'm just going to use the back of my diamond stone because you're more likely to have that, and it's more reasonable that if you're already working with some stones that you've got one of these. So what we're going to do is grab some of this thin double-sided tape, and you want to get a thin layer just on one side of your stone. You don't need to put any more on than you have for the blade to come in. So you can see I don't need to put that much in, so one strip of this is enough. Don't let it unravel itself. Now the best way to cut this stuff off is to just grab your marking knife, just give that a little cut along there. Now this stuff is activated by pressure, so push it down. Now you'll be able to use a scraper to get this off later on, so you don't really have to worry. So we'll peel the back off. Then we'll grab our paper. Bing, the 120 grit here. And we'll just roughly cut it off. A knife would be a little bit easier there, but I don't want to blunt my knife. So now we've got on here, so we're going to be using this dry. Now, if you have your permanent marker, I'm going to mark right across here, and you can use different angles to try and to detect whether it's working, but since this is going to be done dry, you might want to put a respirator on. You don't really want to breathe any metal in, although they tend to stay down here. So the beauty of the sandpaper is that once it goes or wears out, it's not working as well, you can peel it off, put some more on, and keep going, so you keep that higher grit level. Now obviously if you could get a 100, 120 grit diamond stone, we're probably not needing to look at this, but for those of you that don't, and I don't, my most coarse one here is this 400 grit. So we're going to work the same as we did in that other video. And we're going to work this back and forwards just like you would normally. Now, don't get under any illusion that this is going to necessarily be quick, because it might not be. But we can already see that we've achieved what I couldn't on my diamond stone inside a few seconds here, even with that back bevel on here. So if we look at this, I've still got a little bit more to remove there, but in those few passes, I've almost flattened this. So you can see that this process is rather effective. So what I'm going to do is just marker pen this up again, just on that end. And we're going to go back to the sandpaper and work it again. Now luckily for me, this is happening fairly quickly, and if it wasn't, we've got the 80 grit sandpaper there. Now I don't know if you can see there, you can see on just here, that little bit is not flat, so we do need to keep going until that flattens out. It's very, very close to flattening out, as you can see here, but there is just this little bit, so we do need to work it for a little bit longer to get that out. I think what it is just a little bit of the marker pens being left there, so we know we still need to work that. Now, for me, I'm already finding that this is not as sharp as it was, and you can sort of feel it, and it also clogs up. So you can see with all this black, some of that is the marker pen. Most of that is actually metal off your blade sitting in the surface here. So if you've got a vacuum that up. If you want to take it outside and knock it on something to tap it out, you can actually just tap it on your workbench like this. And you can see it knocks a lot of it out. And it also means you're not going to breathe that in, because you've just turned it upside down and just tapping it straight on your piece of paper towel or whatever you've got under. And now we can come back. And it's working more efficiently again because it's not clogged. Just like you would with a file. Now some of you are asking, is this going to generate a lot of heat because we're using it like this? Is it going to generate a lot of heat on the blade and could it wreck the temper? Theoretically, yes. But since your fingers are in direct contact with that, if you're letting it get that hot, you probably have lost the feeling in your fingers. So if it does generate a little bit, just stop for a moment, let it cool down, and then get back to it. Now, we're still not quite there on this blade. So I'll show you how we switch these out. Now, sometimes you can get lucky with these when you pull the backing off. You can see here, you can take the paper off and you don't have to reset your tape. So you can come straight back in, drop another bit down on there. This time I'm going to have to use my marking knife. Cut that straight off. And we're back to work with a brand new piece of sandpaper, which is going to work faster, whether that is a higher grit or just more of the same stuff, because this does wear out relatively quick while doing this. And it's going to last a less amount of time with any of these modern blades if you've got one that's really bad. Generally your modern ones are not going to need this level of work because they're machined on machines that have flattened them quite nicely, and so they're never really this bad. And if they are, you just send it back and get a new one. But the modern alloys, modern metals they use are much harder, so this process is going to take longer. Just like my blades up over here on my wooden hand planes, well, they're a bit of a softer metal, so they're a little bit easier to flatten. Now this is quite common when you sharpen with sandpaper. Sometimes you'll sort of get this, and you've put more marker on there, you kind of get it left behind. And partially that is because we're using 120 grit sandpaper here. It doesn't tend to happen on the finer grits, but you can sort of flatten it and you don't necessarily remove it because you've got quite deep grooving from your sandpaper. And I'm going to say that's pretty flat now, so I'm going to go back to my usual process here. Automotive window cleaner on my 400 grit diamond stone. And we'll run it back and forwards. And I've still got my little black marks here that I'm using as my guide. Just there so I know how far to come in. So you can see when we look at this here that we have some shiny bits and then some not so shiny bits. Now that is letting us know where there's a little bit of indiscrepancy that the sandpaper hit but our diamond stone didn't hit. Now that could be the surface on it, it could be the quality of the paper, and if you really wanted to, I'm going to a 400 grit here, so you could actually go from a 120 to maybe a mid-ground grit of 240 or something like that first, but it's not 100% necessary, but it might make this process a little easier. Now, the other thing you can do is not do the entire amount. You could actually just drop it to a smaller amount, especially if you're not doing a lot of hand planing. You could just flatten a smaller amount and get back to work. Now, I don't think this is going to take too long on our diamond stone, so let's get back to it. Sometimes there's just some things you can't speed up. The initial flattening you can speed up, but getting it there after you've gone from your sandpaper back to your diamond stones or your water stones or your oil stones, time is just what's required. Remember, always spin these around. You want to evenly wear your diamond stones. So we're a little all over the place, and this is why in the first video I didn't really want to mention using sandpaper like this, because unless you stick with sandpaper, I find that you sometimes get some inconsistent results like I have here. Now, let me know if you guys have experienced the same thing when going from sandpaper to diamond stones, water stones, anything that's nice and flat. Just like with the sandpaper, it's important to remember to keep this clean. If it gets filled up with too much stuff, I like to wipe it back. And if you can't see it, you can actually slightly change your angle of your blade, and then you'll see the scratch pattern. But I like to keep it straight because I keep the same reference then. Now remember, while it might take a little bit of more time back on the stone now to sort of flatten out from the sandpaper, this would have taken hours for me to keep flattening on this same grit. So if you can get one of these higher grit or more aggressive diamond stones, they can be a good option. But the only thing you got to bear in mind is the larger the grit, the less time they last. And now looking under light to me, this now looks like it's flat. I know it doesn't quite look like it. Looking on the little screen on the camera here, it looks like it's not right. So let's double check to see if the camera's correct or if my eyes are correct. Let's move on to the mid-size grit, which in this case for my diamond stones is 800 grit. If it doesn't look like we're changing it and that it's coming out nice and shiny and flat, we'll have to go back again. This is not focusing properly, and we can now see the marker pen's gone. It looks like there's a couple of different scratch patterns, but that's just because of different angles when I used it for the back bevel. To me, the scratch pattern looks like it's changed to a finer scratch. Obviously it's a little bit hard to see on camera. Under the light here, to me it looks like it's changed. Now we'll move on to 1200. Do the same thing. Bear in mind, generally your middle grits, you're not on there for as long. I don't know if you can hear that little clicking sound. It tells me I've got a little bit of some indiscrepancy grit on here. I've picked up probably a little bit of grit from the sandpaper. I just heard it making a different sound. So I'm just going to clean it and come back. That sounds better. My eye, that's looking good now. So let's grab the strop. Charged with honing compound. Now when I've done this with sandpaper, I go a little bit longer on the strop. I'm not putting a lot of pressure down, I'm sort of just pulling it across the surface. You don't really want to really push it down because that could roll this edge here, which you don't want. If you've got a thinner leather, maybe you can push a little bit harder. If you're using just straight MDF, you could probably push a little bit harder because you've got quite a hard surface, but the strop is the best. Minimum 50 strokes in my opinion. We're removing small amounts of metal here and essentially polishing the surface to roughly 10,000 grit. And now you can see these blades never come up as polished as the newer steels. So if we look at this one on the Lubin, that looks more polished. It's actually got scratches along the surface if you look close to it, which you can't really see. Now that I've stropped it, you can see where maybe I missed a tiny bit just here, and I should have worked on the grit a little bit longer. Just on the side here, it looks like it's a little bit out. So that might be something I go back and put back onto the stones. But you can also see that we accidentally got some much deeper sort of scratches just here, which is hit and miss with the sandpaper in my opinion. I find sometimes it's much harder to notice the differences between when you're flattening it on other stones and then coming back, but it is still flat enough and we should be able to make a chip break it to the back of that fine. So there you have it folks, that's how you can flatten a really out of flat blade. Do note, if you've got a really bad like hollow in your blade, I wouldn't recommend trying to remove that. Just keep operating with that blade. As long as you've got enough flat to get your chip breaker on there, that's going to get you started. You don't really need to go for hours and hours trying to remove a hollow. If you've got a belly on your blade, I would recommend getting that off because you're not going to be able to get that flat with that there, and this process is good for that. And if you've tried the ruler trick, picked up a blade that's got the ruler trick or a back bevel on the blade, and I've seen a few in my time that are in a pretty bad state, then the sandpaper will sort you out. If you want to, and you can get wet and dry sandpaper, I reckon that's a good option because you can wet it, stop any dust building up, get the swath out of the way, all that sort of thing. But if not, just your standard household wooden sandpaper, aluminium oxide will get you there. So if you like this video, please do like and subscribe down below. While you're down there, do sound off in the comments. Would you do this sandpaper process? Do you like the ruler trick? Let me know down below. Which one would you do? Which one do you think is better? Which one do you think is easier? Because I'm on the fence. I'm not a big fan of the ruler trick, although I can see that it does get you out of a few situations. Currently, I think I've only used it on 3 of my hand plane blades because I prefer to get the whole thing flat and then you don't really have to worry about the ruler trick. It's not something that I like to do if I don't have to. So if you'd like to see another great video such as the one you've seen here today, do check out the videos on screen now. Bye for now.